Hello, everyone. Today we have a special guest. Our guest today is attorney Beata Valente. Beata, hello.
Thank you for having me.
Hello, Vieta.
Hi.
So we have a lot of questions for you, but one of them is going to be, how did you get into real estate law?
There's a long and a short story. My dad, when we first came here to the United States, my dad used to not flip houses per se, but we didn't stay longer in a house than 5 years because you fix it up, you get equity, you sell the house, and you move to the next one. So by the time I was in law school, we were already on our third house and everything. And then when I was graduating law school, there was a real estate attorney looking for a real estate attorney, associate. So I said, why not? I like real estate. It seems like a positive way of practicing law, and it seems to be also one of the friendlier ways to practice law because it's usually a positive experience for everyone. So I said, why not? And it's been 20 years since then.
Great. Another question. What made you choose real estate over other law?
Well, it's less adversarial. We don't really try not to fight. The goal is to have the buyer and the seller be happy, and it's usually typically a happy transaction. It should be a happy memory for everyone. So I didn't want to do too much of the negativity of people fighting and everything. I want it to be more of a positive spin on law. So
Nice. And how long have you been doing the real estate law for?
it's been almost 21 years now.
Right.
Yeah.
So what have you seen the transition changes like from 20 years ago to today? Like what has been the most challenging or change or things you've seen so far?
Positives and negatives. A lot of it is become more electronic. We're able to do a lot more with emails, obviously, e-signatures, etc. And there's also negative drawbacks because now, especially after COVID, everyone has learned to do so much stuff electronically, and it's almost instant reply, and sometimes you just can't do it. The changes also have been to the real estate contracts. We've gotten more and more in-depth in them, negotiating more certain aspects of the contract. So, but ultimately, technology has been, I think, the biggest change in real estate. And the way people shop for real estate, purchase real estate, and what their expectations are.
Okay, so e-signatures and other issues, but what is the most common issue you see in real estate transactions, with the contracts and other parts?
It's always boils down to, I think, inspections. Sometimes people, when they get into a house thinking they can go without an inspection, or they think they can purchase as is, and then once they really get into the house, they realize what is really wrong with the house, and sometimes they might not want to pursue the transaction in an as-is conditions, or want to negotiate or renegotiate something. And sure, we can always try to renegotiate, but the important thing always is to remember how you signed the contract, why you signed it a certain way. For example, as is with no requests, you want to make sure that you take into consideration, for example, if you were maybe 10 offers on a property and all of a sudden you are trying to renegotiate those terms, you might lose the transaction. And as long as you understand that you can lose the transaction, you still want to ask, because why not? It's not a huge issue, but sometimes I've had transactions that just cancel because they said, you signed as is, no requests, and I'm sorry, we're not entertaining anything. We're moving on to the next buyer.
Right. So when that happens, what do your clients say, or they just know that, hey, we just lost the deal and that's what it is? And
correct. There have been issues that we've lost the transactions and the sellers simply don't want to come back because at this point it's a lot of egos and personalities and also backup offers, and we just walk away and get their money back, the deposits back. There are situations where the buyers can try to withdraw their requests, and sometimes the sellers come back and say, okay, fine, if you really withdraw everything, we'll move forward with you. But like I said, as a buyer, you have to make sure that you understand that there is a chance you might lose a transaction altogether.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I know that in some states, attorneys are not needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in Illinois, they're definitely needed here. And what would you say the biggest benefit is of, actually dealing with an attorney, and then instead of going to a different state and they don't have the attorneys, would you still recommend, the buyers and the sellers to get an attorney just to cover their backs, right?
I mean, as an attorney, yes, I always recommend using attorneys, but it's also not to promote just basically myself and my office. You always want to have someone independent to review your contract, to be essentially fighting for what you want and what your needs are. Yes, you have a realtor, you have an inspector and everything, but you also want someone to be looking objectively at it for you, to review the terms, to make sure that your deadlines are met and everything, and to explain everything to you at closing. There are situations where you show up to closings, even downstate sometimes in Illinois, they're not using attorneys and there's no one there to explain to you. You are shown to a room, sign documents, and here you go. You need an attorney to make sure that you have everything explained to you, and then everything is prepared per contract, that there hasn't been errors and everything. So this is why you would recommend an attorney going through that transaction with you.
Especially right now when I see there's a tendency to multiple offer situations. We add additional documents
Correct.
to any transaction. Attorney has to review it.
Correct.
I think it's very important that if you have your client sign anything, have attorney consult it and see if it's needed or if it's required. What are the common issues with the sellers if they hide some kind of a defects with the properties?
Well, it depends. Am I representing the seller or the buyer? As the seller's attorney, I would hope that they would not obviously hiding everything. We always tell our clients to answer honestly to the best of their knowledge. A seller is not under the duty to investigate. So if they really don't have any knowledge, they're not really hiding, even though an inspector might find something. An inspector is a trained professional that can find certain things that a regular person just living in a house won't. As a buyer's attorney, you would have to really strongly document that the seller knew about something. So you can pursue them for a lack of disclosures or hiding something. And it's typically really hard to prove, because if you do have an inspector and your inspector didn't find it, and then after closing someone finds it, well, if your inspector didn't find it, you didn't find it, how do you expect a regular homeowner to have found the defect and hid the defect?
Right. Is there any specific term, like a few months or after the transaction closed that, the seller is still obligated?
Yeah, for the statute of limitations on the residential disclosure, you have up to 1 year after the residential disclosures to pursue into that, to sue the seller if they disclose something incorrectly.
Okay.
There's other statutes of limitations, but you would have to prove intent and fraud. There's 2 years, but you would have to really prove that they knew about it, they purposely hid it in order for the transaction to close. So that's a much, much harder way to prove it. But on residential disclosure, you can go back into them for a year.
Got it.
So there's statute of limitations and real estate
Correct.
as well.
Correct.
Yeah, because I lived in Wisconsin before, right? And my old neighbor told me that they were getting sued from a house that they had sold maybe like 7-8 years ago. And they went back to them, trying to suing them, and getting money back from that. Does that happen here in Illinois?
I mean, I always tell people that lawsuits happen, whether someone has the right to do it or not do it. Sometimes they just file lawsuits. And unfortunately, you have to defend yourself. So someone like that might then prove documentation, say, I sold it 7 years ago. Whatever the lawsuit is regarding, it doesn't relate back to me. And you can get thrown out of the lawsuit. But you still have to be in it, hire an attorney and everything. It's the same thing as a breach of contract. Everyone says, well, I have a contract. Well, the contract is only enforceable in lawsuits. So if someone breaches a contract for real estate, if you want to force them to sell to you, it's the same way. You have to take them to court to force them into action. It's not a criminal. Breach of contract is criminal. It's not like you're going to call the police and everything. So everything has to be litigated, and unfortunately, you have to hire another attorney, et cetera, to pursue that or get out of that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really good to know.
I deal with a lot of investors, and I'm sure you have investors too, as your clients. What is the best legal structure for the investors? As far as their corporation, company. How do you?
At a bare minimum, they need to have really good insurance for the corporation. If they're purchasing in a corporation, the typical recommendation for investors for purchasing real estate is to purchase in a series LLC, because that way each property they own can be purchased into a separate subseries, and doesn't have liability for the umbrella corporation. So, for example, if let's just say an LLC owns 3 properties, each property is not liable for issues with the other properties. So that's what a serious LLC would do. That's the best way to do it. Some people have tried to avoid that because it's costly. Obviously, each opening and closing and filing annual reports. So you can also do a trust, but trust is more privacy. So if you don't want a trail of who's buying the property, who's selling the property, the trust would be the next step. It can still be opened up in court proceedings. You can still have to disclose who's the owner of a trust, so it doesn't have the same. And the last, obviously, it's getting a really good insurance policy, regardless. If you're buying it in personal name, at least make sure you have a good umbrella policy that covers everything for that. But typically, LLCs have been the winners for investors.
Okay. So definitely recommend an LLC for an investor.
Correct.
And I'm just curious, like, do you also work with, in real estate, do you work with clients that have the property, it's already paid off, and they want to leave the property to their children or to someone? Do you work with something like that too? Or no?
Yes, you can do that. It depends. I always come off very anti-family when I say this stuff. When you want to give your property during your lifetime or add someone to title, you can do that. I would always caution everyone to be very careful. When adding someone to title, you can impact their financial standing. For example, for a first-time homeowner, if you get added to title, in the future, there may be some programs for first-time homeowners. You're no longer qualified because you've been added to someone's title. If you're thinking of going to college and you're looking for financial assistance, being on title, added to title, will impact that. And there's reversal is also the same. Some younger people also like to add seniors to title. It can impact their medical or any assistance, government assistance, by being added to title. As far as giving people properties, always be very careful, because once you give, you can't take it away. Once someone is on title, you need their permission to be removed from title. In situations, and especially family situations, family dynamics change. I've had clients that have added sons and daughters, and then something happened in life and they wanted to have them removed because they're just not getting along the same way. Mm-hmm. And some have gone smoothly, and some said, you have to pay me out, regardless whether you got it for free or not. You have to pay me a certain amount because now it's my property. So gifting it's something you really have to consider. You also have to consider tax consequences and talk to your accountant. But once you give, you can't take it away.
Right, but the thing that I notice a lot, I have friends, right, and mm-hmm. they're a little bit older, they don't have kids, and then I have friends that are a little bit older, they have mm-hmm. kids, but then they have 5 of them. 2 of them do not do anything with the house and never help out the parents. They don't do anything, mm-hmm. and then 3 of them are fighting. Oh, I'm gonna keep this. Mm-hmm. No, it's my turn, and this and that. The easiest thing, what would you recommend to have the less headache available for the whole family?
Estate plan. Doing estate planning, most likely, at a minimum, you want a will to outline who gets what after something happens to you. However, wills still have to be probated. They still have to go to court. So if you want to avoid court, you can also do 2 different types of trusts. You can do a land trust, just holding a real estate property, but that typically has annual costs, and some people don't want to pay an annual cost. It's only $100, $150, but it's still an annual cost, and that avoids probate. Or if you want, and there's more assets just other than just real estate, you can do a living trust, and you can essentially set it up as a will. You retitle your property into a living trust, and you assign who can be a beneficiary should something happen to you, and that also avoids probate. Living trusts unfortunately cost a couple $1,000s to set up, but they have no annual fee.
No annual fees. Okay.
Correct. So correct.
Some money to set it up.
Correct. But it's definitely, if you know you have a sticky family situations, you really definitely want to set up something to make sure there's no arguments.
Yeah. So your advice would be, hey, save the money, spend the money correctly mm-hmm. in your trust or mm-hmm. whatever you have to do to avoid any drama with the family down the road.
Correct.
Okay. Trust. And when I go to closings, I deal with a lot of attorneys, and most of them recommend living trust.
Correct.
That's what they say. It's the best way to.
Correct. It's just It's just the sticker shock. Sometimes people don't understand that it costs a couple $1,000s to set it up.
Right.
But once you set it up, you can add any assets, any future acquired real estate or anything. You can keep adding to it and retitling assets into it. So it's not like something you need to keep amending and it's not going to cost you. And in land trust, yes, you have just a small annual fee, but depending on how many years you're healthy and keep a property, it can add up. So might as well then also pay upfront for the living trust and control it yourself.
Right. Another question. We still have clients that ask questions like, do I need attorney? Do we need to hire somebody when we have to? So what actually can be, reviewed and changed during the attorney review?
As an attorney, I can essentially almost modify anything I want other than purchase price. It's specifically spelled out in the contract. As an attorney, I can't modify purchase price. Having said that, that doesn't mean I should modify everything. It always depends on the circumstances of the transactions. Sometimes there's certain paragraphs that are marked, especially as far as inspections, commissions, etc. So you want to be really careful what you modify because you don't want to also undo the negotiations that happened during the contract signing. That's not to say that I can't protect my client. I just have to know the circumstances that surrounded it. Like you were saying, there's multiple offers so many times, and there's a reason sometimes the contracts are written and accepted almost anti-buyer or much more favorably towards the seller. Well, because there were 10, 15 offers and this was the best way and a buyer really wanted that property. So I can't just go and say, oh my gosh, I need to change everything. This is so pro-seller. I don't want to do that. I need to talk to the agent. I need to talk to my client and say, hey, did you understand what you were signing? Are we modifying anything? And everything like that. Typically the smaller items are just taxes. Sometimes the realtors don't have the same information that I have about real estate taxes. Those are easier to modify. But as far as other terms, especially ones that have been initialed by everyone, are harder to modify. But like I said, I can modify almost anything other than purchase price.
Purchase price, which is great. That's why I suggest attorney to every transaction because we can still modify and change some terms, although seller and buyer has to be on the same.
Correct.
Yeah. So have you ever had a deal that you saw yourself, right, and then you told your buyer, hey, you know what? I honestly think you should walk out of this deal. What has been like one that, or have you had any, before?
Okay, so as an attorney, I can provide you with advice, but I try not to give my own opinion. I come pretty close to have said to clients that I would have not purchased, but reality is my position is always to provide pros and cons. Recently I had a client that was purchasing a house that we had issues with inspections. There were stuff it was a flip. It wasn't done correctly, but okay, they promised to fix. There were issues at the walkthrough. All of a sudden the property didn't have water. They show up a survey that is not what we anticipated the survey to be. And to me, those are signs to say, maybe this is not the property for you.
Wow.
And then I explained to the situation about the water, what could possibly cause it after closing, and I wouldn't recommend closing right now. I explained the situation with the survey. I said, I know very few people that would be willing to close on this survey the way it is. And my client decided to purchase anyway. I had her sign a disclosure that I said, I advised you about all these issues and you're still moving forward. After closing, she was talking to the realtor and says, I understand she was pushing me to cancel, but I wanted this property. So as an attorney, I won't tell someone, for example, I won't tell someone that saying $1,000 for inspection items is more than sufficient. I don't know how much some of the stuff costs. I'm not handy to a certain degree, things I'm handy with. So I make my clients make their decisions. It is what they're going to be living with. It's the house that they're going to be fixing or the house that they're going to be selling. I don't know what their intentions are and what they want. So my goal is to always present. Sometimes I have to present the really negative stuff, but my position has never been cancel or not canceled. I don't see houses. It's hard for me to judge someone. I just provide them with legal advice.
Right. But sometimes you have that feeling.
Yes. And I think, and sometimes we're so thankful. We don't want cancellations, but sometimes we're so thankful that a client just kind of finally took, not debate, but just took the initiative and say, yes, it is hard to walk away, because it is hard to walk away, especially if you're vested, if you spend money on an inspection and maybe the appraisal already went through. Sometimes it's really hard to walk away because you think you're vested. But this is typically a 30-year mortgage. This is not a 6-month investment. This is a couple-year investment. So sometimes we are really glad that buyers really think about it before they decide, I'm moving forward regardless, and they cancel.
Okay. But you've been in real estate for 20 plus years.
Yes.
I'm sure you've seen a lot of things. And with no names, what is like the funniest or the craziest transactions that you ever had?
There's quite a few. I mean, at least once a year, we have a client, whether it's my client or opposing client, that shows up to the closing at the property thinking the closing is actually physically at the house that they're buying.
No.
Recently, last year, I had a client show up to a walkthrough, and the property was supposed to be vacant. The property was not vacant, was occupied. And then there was a tenant at the property, and the seller thought that he could just change the keys. He was about to call the locksmith and change the keys on the tenant. And we said, hold on, you can't just lock someone out of the property.
Right.
And they were convinced that they could just lock someone else. There were food in the fridge, there were shoes. Previously, the house was empty, so they had squatters. And we had to undo that and end up canceling because it was taking forever. But yeah, there's hoarder situations. There's someone that's always fighting over some nail holes in the walls, and sometimes you think it's not a big deal. A little patch, and sometimes it's the biggest hole that's in the wall, like someone, jackhammered it, and it's just a nail hole. So it just depends. Personalities are different, just like properties are different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of our clients, they could have that fear, right? And like, oh, there's a hole in the wall, it wasn't there before, what do we do now? And that's why it's important to have the walkthrough and also have an attorney that's going to get your back and be like, hey, we need to fix this. Here's the contract. Here's a piece of paper. You're going to sign it, or we're not going to go through it. And I highly suggest getting an attorney for a lot of people, especially if it's your first time buying a home. It's a big investment. What would you tell like a first-time home buyer? They're young kids, like you clearly said, it's 30-year mortgage. You're going to be like 50-something and they're in their 20s. They're going to be 50-something when they pay off their mortgage, but they're scared of the long commitment. Have you had any clients like they freak out? They're like, oh my God, it's like 30 years and I'm going to be stuck in this house for 30 years. What do you do sometimes to like ease them? Or in your profession, like what are some of the things that, hey, this is guaranteed you're going to be doing this payment for this long, like no matter what, you still pay rent, you still have to live somewhere,
Correct. That's really what it boils down to, is some people have to realize that they have to live somewhere, unless you're living with your parents rent-free, and that's not happening as often as you would think it does. You have to live somewhere, and your rent is covering someone else's 30-year mortgage, and you're paying that off. And I always tell also people, it says 30 years. You can also shorten the life of your loan. You can prepay your mortgage at any time. You can also, people don't live in their houses 30 years. You can sell your house and you can upgrade, or you can downsize, but you still have equity. It's equity that you wouldn't have anywhere else. I grew up in a household where rent was not permitted. You move out of your house, you have to purchase something. You're not paying someone else. You're not paying someone else's mortgage. That was the theory. So yeah, I think people freak out, but you also realize that sometimes I show them at closing amortization schedules, and I say, give out one Starbucks a month, or a week, fine, a week, a month. I always play around with $10 a month of a prepayment, and people don't realize how much thousands of dollars they can save them in the loan process, in amortization schedule. So there's ways to make them more comfortable, but ultimately, a lot of them don't realize that if they really sat down and wrote down their current budget, a lot of them are overpaying on rent. They don't have tax deductions for interest. They don't have tax deductions for their real estate taxes, and they just keep paying and paying for someone else's mortgage. A lot of the times, even with the higher purchase prices and the higher interest rates, a lot of the mortgage payments are currently pretty in line with the rent payment. So if you're able to afford your current rent payment, you can afford your mortgage. And then you can go to itemized deductions on taxes, and there's benefits of home ownerships. Sure, there are some people that probably will forever be on rent because they just are not, they don't want the obligations, and they understand they're losing out on an investment. But most people understand that there's money to be had and money to put in their pocket. You just have to get over that 30-year hump.
Yep. And that's where Peter and I also come in, and we advise them, pretty much the same thing. Like, hey, are you going to live rent free? Are you going to live with your mom, your dad? And then sometimes those relationships could end up pretty messy, You're in their house, and then your family grows, you get married, you have family, and then what are you going to do? What are your kids, where are they going to live at, And that's something that, Peter and I always try to figure out with a lot of our clients. And, it's good to know that all three of us have the same mentality. Hey, do not pay someone else's mortgage, build your equity, take advantage of home ownership. And that's an awesome point to bring up.
I've been stressing this out on previous podcasts. You gotta have some plan. You gotta save some money. There are certain times in the year that there is a right moment to purchase, and if you don't need that especially right now, I think there was a new program that just came out with $15,000 down payment.
Yeah,
they're giving free $15,000 down payment. And you don't need a lot of money to purchase a property, especially if it's a condo or a townhome, something less expensive.
Yeah. So these are the benefits, and that's a great thing that you brought up is hey, don't be added entitled, because this is only for first-time home buyers. The $15,000 down payment assistance. So you bring in that subject up, sometimes your parents want to add you on title, but then they're messing up your chances of getting this $15,000. So that's a great point. It was brought up, and these are the things that they have to talk to us about. And also, as an attorney, it's always great to have an attorney that knows her laws, and knows hey, I don't recommend this. Honestly, I recommend a lot of families to talk to an attorney before, and then you give them the benefits, the pros and the cons. Like you said, the pros and cons. This is what I recommend. At the end of the day, you make your decision, and you're going to go through it. But at the end of the day, yes, buy real estate. Get real estate. That's the way that you're going to be free from paying a lot of taxes and spending your money and not see any benefit of it.
It's the really long game, but it's a really good long game. I mean, yes, you can flip houses, and you can downsize, upsize, whatever you want. But essentially, in 30 years of living somewhere, you're going to have an asset that's hopefully fully paid off at that point, or pretty close to paid off. And it's really hard anywhere else to get that. It's a sleepy asset because you don't see it. You don't see it growing in your account. There's no interest collecting. But sooner or later, the equity is there.
Yeah, right. No, yeah. I have friends that have bought property, 7 years ago, before, COVID happened. And right now they have over $130,000 a night. Then they pay maybe $300 a month for their mortgage, because the tenants pay most of it. Some of them have had headaches. Some of them have been super grateful. They're oh man, the water bill went up. Who cares? It's a couple bucks. I don't care. I'm paying less than $600 a month for a rent, and then I live in a nice area, very desired. And now they're taking out money from their equity, and they're purchasing more homes. One of my friends has 4 houses now, and the guy went in. He's hey, let's risk it. Let's do it. And, he learned how to do his own construction, and how to paint himself, how to sand the floors and all that. And I'm well, dude, out of $100,000, you tripled it or something like that already. And it's amazing what real estate could do for you. And it's amazing how, you could guide them and tell them hey, start an LLC, become get your own business. Don't put this under your name only, because something may happen and then you get sued. Just put under the company.
Correct.
And that's a lot of positive feedback that you give, our clients, our friends and family and everyone.
And advertising, the key to wealth is, buy, rehab, rent, and refinance.
Yeah.
Then do it one after another after another.
Correct. I have quite a few clients that way.
Hold
That's
on
their
to
retirement
it. Don't
fund.
sell. Hold on
Yeah.
to it.
Pay off by retirement, and all that rental will be your retirement income.
Yeah, and
Their plan.
it's the best thing to do. Like you said, the retirement, we're all going to need to retire sometime, you know? And that's something that a lot of our younger crowds and even like in their mid 30s or 40s, you know, they're still afraid. Dude, we only got like maybe like another 15, 20 years of working. I don't want to work my whole life. I don't want to work till I'm 80. This is the best hack we could find is like Social Security money is not going to pay us a lot of money. You know, a couple $1,000 that we're going to get. Everything's so expensive. You're not even going to be able to afford a rent or anywhere.
Right.
And, you know, these are the best hacks that, you know, you can do as an adult, you know, and because you want to retire comfortably. Like we like going to Mexico. We like to take our vacations. We like to, you know, sit down next to the beach and drink our margaritas, drink our little beer, have a little water, eat fresh food, you know, take advantage of the nice weather. And what better thing to do than to have real estate? And she's going to guide you. She's going to tell you what to do in order for you to back up your assets and make sure that everything, you know, goes to plan. And we're all here to give you guys a breakdown. We're all here to help you out.
Right. Okay. Beata, we know you as a real estate attorneys, but you know, I'm sure you on your days off, on your time off, have some things that you do besides real estate and besides the law. What is that thing that you like to do for?
Well, if you saw me at closings, you know I talk about my dogs. I have actually been in the dog rescue, probably for now almost 12 years. I foster dogs through our organization and probably fostered at least 100 plus dogs. They've been in and out of my house. I've adopted a few. I gave away a few, etc. I have 2 of my own, and that's what I do in my spare time. It's usually a lot of seniors and a lot of medical cases. I just take them in and help the rescues out and hopefully get them adopted. So
Right.
it's my spare time.
That's a nice thing to do. I love animals. I have a dog myself.
Mm-hmm. We all have dogs.
You know, dogs.
Yeah, I got a dog again after 2 years. My previous dog passed away and out of nowhere. And yeah, it hurts, you know. It's a hard thing to go through, and you know, your pets become your family, and sometimes you love them more than people, you know, like I do.
They don't ask for an iPad, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, that's definitely for sure. Yeah, all they want to do is play, run around the house, and do whatever they want.
Correct.
You know, but it's a great thing that you do. Like hundreds of dogs. They just dogs or cats too.
Dogs, little dogs. I'm allergic to most dogs, except for the hairy and furry ones. So it's a lot of Shih Tzus, poodles, etc.
Mhm.
So little dogs.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I love that kind of dog. You know, like I'm allergic to like the fur as well,
Mhm.
and even like with the cat. You know, like before I had a cat, and you know I got him as a kid, and miraculously I wasn't allergic to him.
Wow.
But any other cats that I try to, you know, feed them or anything, they're in the alley. I'm like, oh, here you go. He's a little cat. I feel like that itch.
Can't do cats at all.
Yeah.
Cats, no. There's no cat that I can do. But dogs, I can do dogs, and we did the same thing. My husband said, no more dogs, no more dogs. We lost one 2 years ago. One of their older ones. We were down to 1 dog, and he says, no, we're going to travel. We're not going to have any dogs. Then he decided he caved, and we adopted one of our fosters. And then says, well, if you're having one, no, I'm having one. So then 6 months later, we adopted one for me. So I don't think we're ever going to have no dogs, but we'll see. We'll see.
So what's up with the travel plans right now? If you have 2 dogs and your husband wants to travel, do you have somebody to?
I have a dog sitter usually, or friends. Hopefully that can step up. I'm dog sitting someone in July. A friend of ours is going to Italy. She wants us. It's one of the dogs that I used to have at our house. They adopted, and we've become friends over the years. So now they're coming back to our house, and I'm like, okay, well, if I'm babysitting your dog, you're babysitting my dog when I travel. So now I have to book my travel so they can return the favor. So, but it does require more planning. So less spontaneous.
But you know what? Like that brings a good point. Like you have your dogs, you're able to bring them in whenever you like, foster them, help families out, right? Mm-hmm. And you're making an impact in the animal's life and the dog's life. You would not be able to do that if you were renting.
Correct.
That's amazing,
My house.
you know?
It's my house. They can destroy my house. I can protect my house. Not every landlord will allow it. I will tell you this, there's a lot more leasing with pets nowadays for major developments, but they're not inexpensive leases. But at the same time, being a dog owner, I can also say there is some not so responsible dog ownership that make a bad name for a lot of our other dog owners that are responsible. So that way there is then, as far as smaller landlords, they don't want dogs because they can be destructive because they hear what's going on in the real estate and with people with pets and everything. So that's why you want to own, because you want to dictate. If you want a pet, you want to be able to do it, and you don't want a landlord or even association changing their minds about your pet. So
Yep.
the only way to do it is through ownership.
Yeah, and that happened to me before, where I took a pit bull. It was a pit bull, and then the girl was like, "Oh my God, like I'm renting, and now my landlord doesn't want her anymore because she's growing and her claws are big, and she's scratching the floor. She scratched the door." And I said, I paid to repair it. And so I took the dog into my mom's house, and my mom was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'll take care of the dog, she'll be okay." But I was happy that I found out, a couple months later, like 6 months later, the lady called me. She reached out to me. She told me like, "Hey, I bought a house. I will love my dog back." And I get her back. And she hasn't seen her in 6 months. And I was like, "Oh, man, I have to."
You're bonded already.
Yeah. But I was like, you know what? You worked hard. You purchased your home, and you miss your dog. Clearly you do, because you're calling me right away as soon as you're closing in your home, and you want her back. So I told Mama, like, "Hey, just give it to her. I'm going to be out of the house. I'm going to go play basketball or something, and you give her the dog." And that's like, pets could be a motivation for a lot of people.
Correct.
And, and the motivation is, purchase your home.
Correct. It's some people are like, well, I want to purchase before I have kids, or some people I want to purchase before I have dogs and everything, because you want the yard or you want the access. So there's different motivations for different people, but yeah, pets sometimes are the one.
Yeah, they're like, honestly, I have had clients that is their number one priority.
Yep.
Like, hey, I want my dog to run because I'm living at my in-laws' house, or I'm living, with my brother, and my brother has another dog, and they get along or they don't get along, and you just want to make sure that they're home.
That's right.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Beata. Thank you for everything, all of the questions answered.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for having me.
See you guys next time.